Hello, this is for discussion module 10 for chapter 12. I will be answering questions 2 through 4. Question 2 asks to briefly explain the 6 golden approaches to ethical decision making while maintaining a brief response, and discuss the approach that seems more natural to you and most problematic. So, so the first golden kind of approach is the golden purse, which it kind of it in the text it kind of makes it seem like sort of a perspective that kind of like emphasizes like the power or advantage that someone like an individual would have. So like it gives the example of that power, of course, can be manifest in many ways, such as wealth, quick wits, or physical strength, for example. So just those, and then it kind of like gave the idea that each person who has their individual power should like reap the benefits and like try to extend their power based on the choices that they make or that they have. So it even has like kind of this idea of like it is on page 388. It says it is her money or his own money. He ought to be able to do with it what she or he wants. So that idea of that you have your like own. I feel like for me this was the most problematic because it emphasizes that idea of individuality and how like it's kind of like each for their own rather than like a sense of trying to strengthen community. So I feel like to me that seemed the most problematic, although I'm sure it has its like pros and cons. Golden mean, it sort of explained it that it was from Aristotle's teachings and how it was based on the idea of virtues and ethics between like extreme, it said, vices, and how that it like promotes balanced and rational decision making. Golden public was sort of one that seemed more natural for me and something that I feel like I've kind of naturally just leaned to, and it was the idea of like heavily considering like what other people think and how you're perceived in the public. It sort of made me think of facing of like code switching or like having that face on that we had talked in previous chapters, and I feel like that's something that my culture and my community has definitely emphasized and wanted to adopt. Okay, so the golden law, it was the golden law. It was So when reading it, it kind of seemed a little confusing to me, but I feel like what it was more describing is like it wanted to see people kind of for like who they truly are, for like how bad or how good they are. I feel like that's something that I didn't really understand, or yeah. Okay, and then I think golden consequence was kind of the um it was kind of like a perspective that like evaluated the outcome of something instead of like what actually happened. um in the text it compared it to universalism, and I think this was the one where okay, so it says that it is grounded in the outcome or ends that will be accomplished through a particular act. The right or wrong of a particular action must be considered in light of the consequences of that action. So, and then, so it's basically, it's grounded in that idea, and then it says that utilitarianism may be summarized roughly as advocating the greatest good for the greatest number. So it gave that idea of like, oh, no one is greater than the other person. So that idea of like that everyone's equal and that your brain like just focusing on the outcome. Okay, golden rule was it was like a rule of like how we act to other people. Like we should give what we want to get. So we want to act to other people how, like, we want to treat other people how we want to be treated. The idea that like I feel like all of our parents tell us at some point, and it was based on that principle, and it emphasized kind of like empathy and flexibility to like encourage and like consider other people's perspectives. And then question 3 asks for a pro and a con of universalism. Why or in what circumstances might it be beneficial? Why and under what circumstances might it be harmful or counterproductive? Finally, what would your overall approach be based on your read of the text? Be sure you cite the text for your response. Okay. Okay, so for this, for this, so universalism in the text, it describes it as the, like, it describes it as this idea that all ethical principles or that ethical principles are like objective and that they're like consistent through like all cultures. And so it basically had this idea that there was one set of like values and standards of like actions or like just like ethics that were applied universally around the world, and that like everyone had this idea. I think a pro of this was that it had like this idea of like consistency, and it was very like clarified, like this is what, like, I think it had like this set standard, and I feel like that would be a pro. But I think a con would be that it kind of reminded me of this idea of like the idea of ethnocentrism, where like everything is about like, because obviously those standards would probably rooted from one specific culture, and so saying that it's applied universally kind of like diminishes or like it's insensitive to other cultures that don't think that way, and you're like automatically putting that on them. And because it says in the on page 396 that the universalist position maintains that ethics is something that goes beyond the cultural limitations of any one cultural system, and therefore does not necessarily imply culture. So I think that kind of like shows that in a way it's trying to clarify for all cultures, but at the same time it's not considering other cultures, because that's the whole point. Okay, relativism on 397 also says that the like relativism is the polar opposite to like such a universal stand in complete like cultural relativism. It says that they use the term to highlight what we are dealing with that we are dealing with a community rather than an individual system. So hello, my notes, please. So it kind of cultural relativism kind of has that ethical principle and values that are culturally kind of like determined, and that it has this idea that those different ethics can only be understood in a particular, like in the context of a particular culture, and it kind of rejects the idea of the universal ethical standards because it like wants to emphasize the importance of respecting cultural diversity. So that's why I think that would be a big pro, is that it has that respect for like, whereas like I feel like it kind of swaps, right, for universalism and relativism, where what was the pro was the con, and what was the con was the pro. So where universalism in this con was that it didn't consider a variety of cultures, that is the pro for relativism, because it has that, and it like avoids the idea that one culture is better than the other, so it avoids that idea of ethnocentrism. Whereas I think a con I think a con would be that it kind of avoids external like things. So it doesn't emphasize how like the importance of having, you know, not judgment but like critique from other cultures, and it kind of actually rejects the idea. So I feel like on that level it's wanting to maintain each culture as is, and kind of avoids the what it needs for it to grow. Yeah. And because it says that okay, so it says on 398 that the strong relativistic position then is simply that each cultural group has its own value system and can only be judged and evaluated from an insider position. So that's the opposite of universalism, where it's trying to reject the idea of outside critique. And I feel like that, in my eyes, that's mainly a con, because you're without critique of others, you won't know how to grow. Okay, thank you.